All right, and hello everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Rent Free History. I'm your host, Kemdi Wosu, and today I have two very special guests. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Monty Stacks.
My name is Dean. I'm the host of the Dean's List.
How are you both doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Happy to be here with you.
Happy to be here with you guys both. I would like to talk the story of how we all met, which was about 10 minutes ago when I sat in the Titan Radio room and I mentioned that I was doing a podcast about history. And then we sparked up this conversation about history and just movies in general.
Yeah.
And now we're doing a podcast together. So,
Yeah.
But
That's right.
I know you two have shows on Titan Radio. You mentioned you have a show called
The Dean's List.
The Dean's List. What is that about? For
I just play a bunch of music and I try to make it like flow together in like a very diverse playlist. Wednesdays at 8 o'clock. Don't miss it.
Wednesdays at 8 o'clock. Please listen to this. Even if, I do upload these to YouTube and Spotify at times. So if you, in the future, this show is still on, I would say check it out. Yeah. And your show.
Yeah, so my show is called Midnight Madness with Monty Stacks, and it airs at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on TitanRadio.org. And basically the format is introducing kind of the younger generation to punk, post-punk, new wave, no wave, a lot of the great music from the late 70s and early 80s that's, considered the basis of alternative music today. And each episode I do my own little spoken word short story that is centered around a one-word theme that all the music kind of is congruent with in the episode. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, this podcast is also somewhat educating people on certain topics. It's mainly topics that I choose. Sometimes it's what the guest chooses. But it's basically, the show's called Rent Free History, as I was explaining to Dean. It's about just like moments in history that live rent-free in my head. Before, we did an episode on the history of NTV, which I did with Julio. And afterwards, I did an episode with my friend Mixley. We did an episode on the Aztecs and human sacrifices and all that.
Cool.
So that was a pretty interesting episode. And today's episode, keeping with the somewhat horror theme, since this is being recorded in the month of October, decided to do a little horror episode. And today we're going to talk about basically the end of the 80s horror genre that moves into the 90s, kind of different layers. There's, I wasn't sure exactly what to call it because you have like the teen horror comedies, you have the teen subversion comedies, you have postmodernism, you have just straight up just like classic slashers, and then you also have J-horror as well. And we'll get to all of that in this episode. So before we get into the 90s, I want to start off with the 80s. So you have the 80s, this decade of technology, where like all the technology started finally catching up with like the ideas of these like horror writers, and everything from like the 70s and 60s, those kind of horror movies, those B movies that look kind of cheesy by nowadays standards. By the 80s, it finally feels like, oh, I can do what I wanted to do in this movie, and it looks like really good. And I can go as over the top as I want with it. And basically you have all these animatronics, you have this liquid foam, you have this latex, just able to contort and extort like the human body into these gross new ways. And you have some like beautiful examples of this in films such as The Fly.
Yeah.
Other things like that. And just like, I feel like this also did a lot in terms of you could say at the decade, the 80s, which was like a lot of I guess you could say excess with like the deregulation and the what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you could say over commercialism, which made things like seem a bit over the top, and you get these over commercialized, just like we're gonna do everything. We're gonna literally throw the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you guys' opinions on 80s films, and what are your like the 80s films that like stand out to you guys?
When you started talking about the special effects and how you could do things with like contorting the body never thought of before, I immediately thought of The Thing,
Yeah.
The Thing.
the classic,
Yeah.
and I thought about how when I watched it somewhat recently, I had also seen that it got really, really bad reviews at first, but that was almost entirely because critics were just like, it's gross. What the heck? Why do they do that? Like, they were literally just going, ah! And that was their whole review. But it's like, that's kind of the whole point. But there had just never been something like that had been so popular. And it also had come out about the same time as E.T.
Yeah.
So, critics were reeling off of how, kind of sentimental that was. That I'm not even sure if that's like a real explanation, but that was something that I think it might have been Carpenter himself who said that he thinks that maybe that little alien was responsible for me getting bad reviews.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick comment on that. John Carpenter's not just my favorite horror director of all time, but one of my favorite directors of all time. And I think it's because he understands the basis of film, which is be entertaining. Like, say what you will about any John Carpenter film, right? They're never boring.
Yeah.
Never, right? Good or bad, they're never boring. But when you're talking about like those practical effects, right? My mind goes immediately to the remake of The Blob, right? So in the 50s, you had this very cheesy sci-fi movie about an alien blob coming down from outer space, and it was very slow and creeping, and you had people cheesily running out of a movie theater from it, in black and white, and it just didn't pop. But in this remake, you have these practical effects that, I mean, to this day, for my money, beat CGI out in spades. Because here's the deal, like, there's something when you see the computer animated effects, your mind subconsciously is like,
Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, like, this isn't real, so I'm not really in danger, right? But when you see something like The Thing or this Blob remake where your mind doesn't know how this creature exists, it doesn't know, like, it is physical, it's like got a physical form, it's foam, it's plastic, it's what you're saying, it becomes a lot more real, right? And so that's when I think horror movies really shined, was when they were able to realize these full practical effects.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you know that's not what they wanted to do in the 50s and
Right,
60s,
right.
but they couldn't do it because, one, they didn't have technology, and two, censorship standards at that time
Hays
specifically.
Code,
Yeah, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
No, you really couldn't do anything back then.
Plus, like,
Nothing fun.
people aren't gonna put like that much money into like a horror movie at the time. Like, they're spending all the money on like the really like emotional, just like gripping dramas at the time, which probably get them the most money. And
Or like the musicals even.
the musicals, those were still like at their peak back then.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, the new Hollywood movement really changed everything as far as budgets go. And so they were throwing huge budgets at like one-time success directors, right? Like a great example of this is Michael Cimino, who did The Deer Hunter, and it was like it was a critic darling, it was a box office success. So he bankrupted an entire studio in the 80s because they threw one of the biggest budgets for any film ever at him with Heaven's Gate.
Oh, yeah.
And he produced this long, arduous, drawn out, like almost 4-hour movie that was just kind of about nothing, and it was a box office flop. But they had the money to do that. It wasn't split up amongst all these different forms of media like TikTok, YouTube, all these things. Like, people were going to see movies. That's what they were going to do. And so those new Hollywood darlings, the George Lucases of the world, the Steven Spielbergs, they really changed the box office culture. And that's what made these budgets, swell to the size that they were, truly.
Speaking of Lucas, too, he also did that in a way because Coppola has American Zoetrope.
Mm-hmm.
He does really good with this movie, The Rain People, and then they make this this deal. I think it was either with Universal or Fox, and they're basically like, you can make X amount of films. Here's the budget.
Right.
You've already given us scripts. We're approving them. All right, you just keep going, shoot the scripts, make us money, and then he decides to have George Lucas film like a full film version of his student film. What was it called?
THX?
THX 1138, which is how the THX like company came to be.
Yep.
And that movie bombs.
Yes.
So they're like, oh, we're gonna take back our money now. And it was more of a loan, so you need to pay us back. But if it wasn't for that, then Coppola would have never directed The Godfather, because he's like, yo, kind of need some money back. So could you go direct this one movie? He's like, fine.
Yeah.
Probably won't be that good anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
But another factor of the 80s, the success of the 80s, is people are throwing their money, of course, at directors to just do whatever they want. But they're also throwing money at these like movies to create more of them. You get sequel after sequel after sequel, and bam, it's a franchise. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. You have Halloween, and there are some that are good at first, because you have, like, you know, the first one or two are okay because they still have like some of the people that were in the beginning, the first one, like involved. But then as they start to go on and on and on, the studios become a little cheaper and cheaper and stingier with the budgets and bringing people back. And it's not that like sequels are in their essence like a bad thing. It's poorly produced and poorly like executed sequels.
Yeah, you see, I hear this criticism a lot with Hollywood in general today, which is that, you know, we're too reliant on reboots and sequels and cashing out on things that audiences are familiar with, because you know it's easy money. And so, you know, the studios, they could take advantage of that and put their all into something that'll be really good for the audience, but you know, sometimes they don't really care about it. They're like, we'll get the viewers anyway, so we don't have to try too hard. But then, you know, after a couple months, people are like, you know, that movie really sucked. You know, Hollywood's got a real problem with sequels and reboots and all that. They're doing too many of them. And it's like, well, y'all just have to, like, put some effort into them and not underestimate the intelligence of your viewers.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So all the movies you bring up, right? So Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, these franchise movies. I mean, Halloween was made on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th was filmed like over a weekend in a like in the woods, you know,
My
like
favorite thing.
you know, it's these movies were made for almost no money, and because they were made for almost no money, they had a soul and a spirit to them, because the filmmakers realized, hey, to make a viable product out of this, we have to be passionate. We have to create something that's really engaging and not rely on, you know, excess funds. And so when you get into the sequels, especially some of the early ones or the mid sequels, I mean, really they're throwing money at something that can't be bought, which is the soul of the movie.
Yeah, like with Halloween, one of the most important things is that they had such a low budget, they couldn't afford to get someone else to do the music. So John Carpenter did his own music, and now it's like the most iconic horror music ever.
And it's such a simple, like, just couple of notes he's
playing.
playing.
There's like two pieces that run through the whole film, and they have like the same chords and everything. It's like he just put the same thing in like different time signatures, and then just ran it back over and over again through the whole movie, and it's iconic.
Yeah, there's a story about that. A famous critic was shown an early screening of Halloween without the music, right? And she watched it, and she came back and she was like, sorry, it's just not like scary. There's nothing that's really evocative about it. So the story goes that Carpenter kind of ran home, did his thing. And, you know, it's good to know that Carpenter does the scores for almost all of his movies. And he kind of ran home and he did his thing and popped the score in and said, hey, could you please come back and watch this movie? I know you saw it, you didn't like it, but maybe you might like it now. Yeah, and she went and she watched it with the music, and she came out of the theater and she said, that's the scariest movie I've ever seen. And it was like the contrast was night and day, just to your point.
That's
you
all
know?
it took.
I wonder if it was Pauline Kael.
It might have been. It might have been. Very famous critic at the time. So, but don't quote me on the name exactly.
Another interesting fact to tread off into Halloween territory is that, like, originally it was supposed to be like an anthology. That's what Carpenter seemed to have wanted. And but they made a sequel. Of course, it had Michael Myers in it, and that kind of changed the course of how everything would go, because you have the sequel. Okay, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a Michael Myers, and then they tried to move away from that with
Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch, the third one, which is like this anthology film about like this. If I remember correctly, there's a bunch of kids. I remember
they have masks.
It's
great. It's weird. This is a movie. This is one of my hot takes. I think it's fantastic. If you're removing it, if you're extricating it from the quote-unquote Halloween franchise, and you just look at it as a standalone weird movie, and it's about like ancient Celtic guy druid cult that are trying to sacrifice children by using these masks and a hypnotizing advertisement that will signal these masks to kill the kids. The masks contain pieces of Stonehenge. It's just so bizarre and weird that it's like, you know what? Like, I'll give you props for originality.
They gotta
right?
make more folk horror movies, man.
Totally. Yeah.
And another interesting one I would like to bring up is, I think it's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors?
Dream Warriors. That's the best Nightmare on Elm Street, man.
Yeah.
That's my favorite, bar none. The most creative kills. That's when Freddy gets really funny. You know, like like if you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, he's menacing. It's like the original, he's scary in a way that's like not cool. It's like it's very creepy, the vibes that he has. And Dream Warriors is where he develops the like funny Freddy, like one-liners, dad jokes, all that. It's pretty great.
I feel like that was the perfect mix between like sort of scary and then sort of campy in a way.
Right.
But like the sequels afterwards kind of just like went way too overboard with the camp to some degree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that also I do want to touch on one more thing before we move into the 90s. 1980s is also when home video becomes like a popular medium.
Yeah.
Before this, like, you wanted to go see a movie another time, you're going back to the theater for a re-release, or you're waiting for it to air on TV if you're lucky, on like CBS, ABC, NBC, or maybe one of the cable channels if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And you know, you have stuff like Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, just mom and pop video shops, and you're renting all these different movies, and you have like other B movies that are also become very popular as a result. You have like movies that like start there as like home video series and just keep going because they're like get so popular in terms of like video rentals. So
Yeah, hence the introduction of like Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
Hence why they made a movie about Ed Wood several decades after he was doing his thing, because it's like, well, now people know who he is, and people are like, yo, these movies are like the worst things I've ever seen, but I can't stop watching them. And he's just fascinating, and I want to make a movie about him.
Yeah, and I think like leading into the 90s, and this is, you know, I'm a little bit older, so this is a time when I was alive. I mean, I can tell you the feeling of going to Blockbuster and looking at all the covers of the films, right? When you're like, that's all you had. You didn't have the internet to say like, what's the IMDb rating on this? You just judged a movie, how scary a movie was going to be based on its box art. And you're like, oh my God, like maybe this will be the scariest thing ever. And sometimes it would be terrible, but you wouldn't know until you got home and you popped it in your VHS, and you didn't want mom and dad to be mad at you for spending their money for renting this bad movie. So you're going to watch it no matter what. Right. And so that's when like B movies do come to prominence, because now we can just switch off Netflix if we're like, this movie sucks.
yeah.
Right.
Shout out to graphic designers
Yeah,
for the one time for
totally.
doing the box art for good and bad movies alike, so that way people can't tell the difference, and they
lost
keep
art.
the bad movies in business.
Totally.
Make the world go round.
So like the 80s, you know, as like the decade comes to an end, the overzealousness and the over-commercialism that like kind of like led to all these like extreme like gory horror movies, it seems to be seen as camp near the end, especially with movies such as Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday, Child's Play 3.
Oh
with,
yeah, that was real bad.
just they start getting kind of worse and worse and worse, and then like each studio keeps like somehow all these franchises like lose their original distributor and like studio that they were made by, and like the rights kind of like bounce off into different people's hands, so the movies start coming out less and less, and they start making less money because each person wants to do a different thing, and then this and this and this happens, and the camp just kind of leads into this like this shift from exactly what was happening. This combined with the shift into a new decade, the 90s. The 90s is the first decade where we kind of get to see the consequences of deregulation and over-commercialism begins to show through these cracks in societies. And one of them is displayed through the 24-hour news cycle. You have these networks now, instead of just newspapers and just like the 9 a.m., 6 p.m., like 11 p.m. telecast of the news, you got 24-hour channels like CNN just playing news all the time.
Dude, the first people to do news at like 4 in the morning and like waking up at 1:30 to get to work must have been like, yo, what are we doing?
It's honestly insane. I actually know people that work in news, and I can't imagine having that schedule. It sounds like so stressful sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
But we have things covered such as the LA riots, the genocide in Bosnia and Rwanda, the O.J. Simpson trial. We have these serial killers and their cases. We have Dahmer. Yeah. We have JonBenet Ramsey.
Can't get away with being a serial killer anymore.
Yeah.
Too much social media.
Too much social media, indeed. What was the other? The Mendez brothers.
Yeah.
You just like everything is talked about and over sensationalized, and it made it seem as like these events like as if the world was like ending basically. To what I researched, especially with like the end of the millennium, then you have Y2K approaching. People thought 2000 all the clocks were going to stop, and then the end of the world was going to come.
Yeah. Because as we all know, if we didn't have time, we would all die. If we didn't know what day it was, we all explode.
But the serial killers become these like they're no longer these like supernatural beings. They become more. Sometimes they have masks on. Sometimes they don't though, and they're these more charming, cunning killers. But no matter what, they're human. Like, and that's the scary thing.
Yeah, people nowadays think serial killers are charming, all right.
Yeah, you have your one for example, Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
So you have like characters like that. So what do you, I mean, you of course were.
Yeah, I was alive for this.
Yeah. So what was this period like? Like, did you like notice this change at first? Or?
Yeah, I mean, so there was like you pointed out something great, right? There was this shift to what was considered scary was something that felt more real and tangible, right? So it's like, I feel like when you're talking about the 70s or 80s with horror, we're still coming off of like Vietnam, and it's this like horror overseas. It's something you can't see, but people are coming home in body bags, and it's this kind of subconscious, indescribable horror, and this feeling of tension that you can't really describe, but you know exists. And the 90s were not that. The 90s were the killer could be your neighbor. He could be the kid that lives down the street, right? So when we're talking about stuff like Scream, right, it's like spoiler alert, I think we're like 30 years too late here, but the killers in Scream end up being 2 high school boys.
Yeah.
Right? And like that was horror. That was like, oh my God, like it could be these all-American
and then 3 years later, Columbine.
Yeah, that's also a good connection because like you just weren't people didn't expect something like that to happen at the time.
Yeah, and that was like the really, really early days of the internet too. So now you get all the crazy people who are like, "Oh, I could have saved them. They just needed a little love."
Yeah,
and
kind of get that online fandom thing.
Yeah.
But so as I said before, the people that were like the killers were more charming and cunning, and this seemed to start off with the most popular, like earliest origin was 91. You have Silence of the Lamb, directed by Jonathan Demme, coming out, and you have this character in Hannibal Lecter who had been in another movie previously.
Yeah, Manhunter.
And he was portrayed by someone different.
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, yeah. And but he wasn't the same character in that movie, and he's more of like a civilized sociopath. And it was used to mark the turning point to like a more like realistic 90s. And you start to have like some movies are horror movies, but then you also have like this weird mix of like also thrillers and procedurals. One, for example, another being Seven.
Yes.
It focuses on a pair of detectives out to stop a serial killer based on society's deepest flaws, which are excessive lust, gluttony, sloth, pride, greed, wrath, and envy, the 7 deadly sins.
What I think is really fascinating about Seven, most of all, is like the monologue at the end by the actor. I forgot his name. We don't talk about him. He goes on that monologue about how it's like, everybody I killed, how could you call them innocent? And he reveals this like religious zealot in him that is just driving him to all of his murder. But it's like, I thought that was one of y'all's commandments. Like, you don't kill people.
I'm honestly not sure. I do not remember 7. I have not seen it in. I'm gonna say actually 7 years. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I saw it when I was 15. So.
Yeah, like you would see everything you're describing, right? There's an ethos to these killers, to what they're doing. There's a motive.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we're talking about Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, I mean, there's very simple revenge plots, but it's not like a philosophy these people have, right?
Yeah, it's
like,
more of like a simple setup in like the first like 10 or so minutes.
Right.
And then the rest of the movie is just about, we've got to stop him, but then we've also got like 80% of the movie is just like slashing.
Right. And then when you get into Silence of the Lambs, you're getting into the psyche of the killer.
Yeah.
Right. And like you get into 7 and you're getting into the psyche of the killer. Even in Scream, the boys describe their motive, why they're doing it. I mean, they monologue like, this is why we're killing.
And it's kind of a prelude to like modern times as well, because 91 Court TV comes out, which is now True TV, which just here's some Practical Jokers reruns. But Court TV was originally just going to be this boring channel, kind of like C-SPAN, where you just like watch court proceedings, but then you have these sensationalized trials. You have O.J. Simpson, you have John Benet Ramsey, you have the Mendez brothers, and people are like invested heavily because they're doing 24-hour like investigations. You have people breaking down the court proceedings like in a way like people do on YouTube nowadays, and with like true crime podcasts.
Or like when there's big cases, I always see like people posting tweets about it. Like there's some like
they're live tweets.
Twitter lawyer type things. They're like they'll just give live updates on when some celebrity is on trial for doing something really bad.
Now known as X.
Or 6ix9ine or Tory Lanez.
Yeah. Or you have these movies that deal with like existential dread and anxiety, such as Jacob's Ladder. You have The Sixth Sense, which I have an interesting story about The Sixth Sense that I heard from this one YouTuber one time, where he was with his sister and they're going to Blockbuster. They rent 50 First Dates and they rent The Sixth Sense.
Oh dear.
Now, for those of you who do not know 50 First Dates, the movie The Sixth Sense is spoiled during 50 First Dates. And they were talking about, oh, which movie do we watch first? Because they were watching them as a family, and they're like, let's watch 50 First Dates first, and then let's watch The Sixth Sense. So the kid who wanted to watch The Sixth Sense got it ruined for him.
Also, I mean, that's a rookie mistake. You always watch the comedy after the horror movie.
I feel like that would make more sense.
The whole thing with Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
And then as you move more into the 90s, you also have this postmodernism era, because like everything in the 80s, like extreme. I like to equate like the 80s to like WWF, which is like the Attitude Era. So you have like, you know, who's slapping to a slapping?
Oh, come on, Macho Man,
Randy Savage.
Here's a little secret. I'm a huge pro wrestling aficionado. So if you ever get into the history of pro wrestling on this podcast, you need to have me back as a guest for that, because that's my that's my wheelhouse right there.
Good to know. So you have this like Attitude Era, which is like what I consider the 80s. You have these hair bands. You have everyone
MTV.
just like everything's MTV. Everything is just like to the extreme. And the 90s is kind of like
almost like apathy is cool.
It's like a cool, like everyone's just like at like a coffee shop. It's like everyone's at the same MTV Unplugged concert watching Nirvana. You know, grunge music becomes cool. Yeah. Everything's a bit quieter, but still angsty to some degree. And horror films, which in the past were viewed as like allegories. You have Nightmare on Elm Street being an allegory for, I guess, like sin, or basically the sins of the parent being passed on to the child, stuff like that. But in the 90s, things seem to be more literal. And you have one of these pioneers of 80s horror in Wes Craven. He's best known for, of course, directing Nightmare on Elm Street movies, at least the first couple. And then he also directed the original versions of Last House on the Left and The Hills of Eyes. And he would create these two movies which would basically come to just define a good chunk of the 90s horror. in Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Scream.
Yeah, I was just telling Ryan earlier that, Scream is kind of like a love letter to horror itself. The whole franchise is all based on, being like really meta and breaking down all the tropes in horror, which is basically its whole genre. It's like kind of dunking on it, but in a very affectionate way. And it also serves to answer like, oh, well, I watch the slasher movies, and every time everyone in it's just dumb as hell, and that's why the killers get away with it. But it's like, no, everyone in that movie, they know what to do because they've seen all the horror movies, and these kids that kill them, they've also seen all the horror movies, so they know what to do around smart people too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, the literalness, like there like you said, there's an extravagance to the 80s. There's this glam and glitz, and in a lot of ways it mimics a lot of what we see on social media today, which is this like nothing you see on social media is real. Like this isn't the lives these people are actually living, right? This is a staged thing, and it's about how you present yourself to the world, right? And so the 80s is that me generation, and the 90s, it was like the realer you are, the better. So things got gritty. And, when you're talking about New Nightmare or Scream, like, gone is the bright red corn syrup blood from, the 80s, and replaced with it is just this like kind of gritty, gruesome brutality. Yeah, it's like it feels very real. And at the time especially, that was like shocking and scary, and that was like wow, what anything could happen next, because it's playing in a world that's like real. And so it brought back that sense of danger that you got from those early practical effects movies where you're like, whoa, this could be happening to me, right?
Yeah.
You also have these muted colors to some degree.
Yeah.
Like everything's like not as like bright as like it used to be, especially like bright for a horror movie.
Right.
But like everything's like a lot of hues of brown, shades of brown, and just like everything seems like a lot more just like realistic, like lighting wise.
Yeah.
I feel like this conversation is going very well. But before we continue it, we're going to take a brief break, play an ad, and then we'll be right back. Thank you.
What's up, Titans? For all of our concert-loving students, there will be a Halloween-themed festival called Nothing Fest on October 21st at the Garden Amphitheater in Garden Grove.
This will feature around 22 artists, including the headliners Innerwave and Late Night Drive Home. Innerwave will be performing their Notorious album 3 in full to celebrate its 10-year anniversary.
If you are someone who likes indie grunge music and wants to celebrate this spooky season with some good music, you can find tickets at nothingmag.tv.
See you there, Titans!
All right, and we're back. We had a conversation that I honestly wish I got on the podcast, just talking further about 90s and like kind of modern day music, because there are a lot of allusions to 90s music and like current day music to some degree. You have these like different eras that seem somewhat different, but somewhat the same in like very similar ways. And I do think it's interesting how like history seems to repeat itself to some degree.
Yeah, the nostalgia cycle, it's always like 15, 20 years off. Like I think right now it's very much like Y2K nostalgia, but also we're still holding on to a little bit of 80s.
Yeah.
We kind of skipped over the 90s.
I feel like the 90s were supposed to have their I was expecting that, because I remember when I was a kid like in like 2000s and then the 2010s, I remember it was like 80s stuff was like starting to come back, and then I remember 80s was like full force mid 2010s. I remember there was this movie in particular called Pixels with Adam Sandler made, and I was like, wow, this is really 80s inspired. And I thought that was kind of what like the rest of the decade was for a little bit, just like all these like dystopian stuff. It was like very Blade Runner inspired. And then I thought also a tangent on Pixels, if like how those like people like have like get hearing aids and are able to hear for the first time. I feel like if they're like they do that with like blind people, if they're able to one day, just like allow them to like. I know there's like experimental surgery they can do for like them to see. They need to be shown pixels because it's like a good like color palette. For, like there's like a lot of colors and it like
Yes.
it doesn't overwhelm you. It's like it kind of like just like slowly like puts more bright things on the screen. And then you're like, oh, okay, so this is what life is, and then you kind of get adjusted to that.
You heard it here, folks. This is the prescription. If you can finally see for the first time after being blind your entire life, watch Pixels. By
More
Adam
Videodrome.
Sandler. Videodrome might be a little intense.
Yeah,
for
start
people.
off with Pixels, then
Then move to Cronenberg.
Yeah.
After Pixels.
So another thing I wanted to talk about, we talked about postmodernism, and then the Blair Witch Project is something I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
I thought the Blair Witch Project was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a film that like people like, of course, nowadays don't understand how important that was,
Right.
Because they watch it and they're like, oh, okay, this is kind of scary, just like a found footage movie. But in a sea of found footage movies like that we're used to today, this was like really the first one, aside from another one called in the 70s called like Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
Oh, Cannibal Holocaust. That one was nuts. Yeah, when you were actually mentioning how cheap all of the original slasher movies were, my instant thought was, and then later you get the Blair Witch Project, which was like, I think it was like $25,000.
Yeah.
But it got picked up by a big studio. Yeah. And, I mean, having a box office success with that is easy money, but it ended up being a really big hit. And ended up, a lot of people wanted to do that. But like at one point in our culture, people tried to convince us that Paranormal Activity were the scariest movies ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I ain't gonna forget.
I think like what's super important to note, one thing I lament about our advances in technology and the ubiquity of the internet, which I think by and large is a good thing. It keeps us connected. We learn more than we've ever learned before. But one thing that was really special about the 90s and the early days of the internet, where not everybody had it, was we still had urban legends.
Yeah.
We couldn't fact check something, right? Now we have things like creepypasta, but everybody knows that a creepypasta is not real. Like you go into it knowing that this is a fictional story. Whereas Blair Witch Project, when that came out, the word on the street and in the schoolyard was, this is real. Like they found this footage in the woods, and these people are really dead, and this is a true story. Right. But we really believed that, right? And that's what made it horrifying.
I can name one urban legend from me growing up.
Okay.
I don't know if you're about my age or something, but do you remember the clowns? The killer clowns?
Killer clown? I don't know if that was more of an urban legend.
No, that happened.
That
was like there was weirdos getting
Yeah,
arrested for
2016.
wearing
Yeah, because
clown
when you
clown
specifically
things.
said like, oh well, you think it might be real, the Blair Witch thing, it might be real, and you can't fact check it. It's like, well, I mean, no, there were actual things going on with the killer clowns, but you didn't see them a whole lot. So it's
I consider that more of like a trend. When I think urban legend, I think like, of course, don't want to say his name more than once, but Candyman.
Yeah, don't say it 5 times.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, right. So like, right. Urban legends generally were like, you're at a sleepover, right? There's no Fortnite. You're there. And it's like, hey, man, my brother's girlfriend's cousin had this thing happen to them, and it would be this horrifying, like, oh my god, the killer was in the back seat sort of deal, and you're like, oh my god, like, and when you can't fact check it, and it's late at night, and you're punchy, and you haven't slept, and you're with your friends, you're like, I'm really scared right now, right? And so Blair Witch Project, like you said, nowadays you could watch it and be like, well, what is this? Like, I mean, I could make this on an iPhone. But when it came out, the reason why it was a cultural phenomenon is because kids and adults alike were unsure of the veracity of it. They were like, this could be real, right?
And what helped was there was actually a website. I think it's still up, but there was like a website that they had that was like from the perspective of the characters, not like a movie website where it would tell you all the movie details, but it was from the perspective of the characters, and they would basically like show like, oh, this is like, I can't remember what the girl's name was in that movie, but it was like her own website from her character's perspective.
That's
and it was
great.
like she was giving like video updates of like her life and stuff like that.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, we're about to go to this thing, and then there was another one that was like, taking pictures of like the forest and everything and like the weird happening on in the forest and stuff like that. So that also helped like a lot. They did a similar thing for Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
And I think the first one, people actually did believe for a little bit because that was like still like right, the iPhone had just come out. Like
Right.
I think broadband internet was like still new that they were calling it broadband internet and not internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last time, and there was a little bit more skepticism there, but I agree with that assessment. It's like, yeah, Paranormal Activity was like a movie where it was like, is this real? Like Ring doorbells didn't really have like a presence, right? And so it was like, okay, someone's setting up a camcorder to watch what happens at night. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, that was, and then, it gets a little ridiculous once you get into the, the sequels
I do
and
think
all
it's
that.
amazing, though, that Paranormal Activity and Final Destination, for those of anyone who who hasn't seen them, I won't spoil it, but I'll just say their final movies have, like, the perfect wrap-up for anyone who hasn't seen them. So I would recommend anyone this Halloween to check out Final Destination. You can skip the fourth one. And Paranormal Activity. Honestly, I don't remember which one's the bad one, so just watch all 6. But, like, the last one, you're going to, like, go, oh, yeah.
Bringing it all home.
Yeah.
Huh?
And then another thing I wanted to talk about was J-horror, or Japanese horror. So that kind of also goes into, like, that whole, like, internet's not around, and also streaming's not around. So you have these, like, stories, like, for example, you have, let's see, you have Ringu, which was later made into The Ring. You have Ju-on, which was The Grudge. You have Audition. You have these weird stories of, like, these, like, weird, uncomfortable stories. Because in the 90s, you basically have everything's, like, kind of postmodern. It's, like, there's nothing, like, uncomfortable or there's something unsettling about, like, some of them, like Seven, there's certain parts of it, but, like, just the whole thing doesn't make you feel, like, icky inside. And that's something that many people apparently at the time felt that horror in America had delved away from. So you have these, like, awkward movies, with these, like, weird endings, and people are searching for them, but they don't know where to find them because we didn't have, like, the ability to just, like, import these films like the way we do now. Yeah. We can't just, like, watch them on streaming. So we basically had to hope that, like, maybe some, like, horror-specific video store would have them, but if not, just out of luck, and you'd have to go off, like, what are basically, like, retellings of the movies, which become then urban legends. Yes. But they become so popular, and in fact, Gore Verbinski decided to start off this trend of remaking these Japanese horror films into American horror films. And the first one that was really popular, and I still think is a great film, is The Ring. I don't know if you guys have seen The Ring, or...
Of course, yeah. And I've seen Ringu.
I think I saw The Ring a while ago.
Yeah.
It's, for those of you who don't know, basically the concept is you watch this thing called a VHS, foreign concept to many of you, I know. And basically it's a weird VHS. It has a bunch of awkward just video on it, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. And then after you're done watching it, you basically get a phone call, and someone on the other line says 7 days, and from that point on, you have 7 days to live before the girl that's possessing the tape comes out of the TV and will kill you. So the goal of the main character in the movie The Ring is basically to prevent her own demise from this ghost girl, basically, and figure out what the root of the problem is to begin with. Very good premise, and I think it was handled very well. One of the few great American remakes out there of, like, another country's property. So,
yeah. With Japanese horror, J-horror, I mean, you said it best. Like, it was the rumor mill that made these movies really scary, because I didn't know anybody who had like seen these movies in the late 90s going into the early 2000s, but we had such a censorship culture going on in America at that point that like the rumor of it was like, these are the most extreme movies, right? Like they're like, they take gore and violence and horror to a level that we cannot take it to here in the United States.
Yeah, I was thinking, as we were talking about the 80s and all of that, somehow I was thinking, okay, well, how do I mention, like, the Satanic Panic? How do I mention that, you know, under Reagan's administration and all the cultural things that came with that, we got really uptight for a little while. But at the same time, you know, we started becoming more transgressive in other ways that you could. Like, that was when they first started putting stickers on albums and say, hey, it's got bad words on it. Don't let your kid buy it. And your kid bought it anyways.
They bought it because, honestly.
Because
they wanted to
They were
great
curious.
Great marketing, you know.
Yeah, no, it really is. Like, you tell the kids they can't listen to it, and that's what makes them want to listen to it. It's really that simple.
Thanks, Tipper Gore.
No,
I mean, that was like the idea was, and in some of the instances it wasn't true. I mean, Ringu is great and it's a scary movie, but it's by no means like any more quote unquote extreme than any other horror movie you're going to see. But in cases like Audition, it's very true, right? And so like when you watch a movie like Audition, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's if you can think of any kind of violent or sexual taboo that exists, that film explores it in depth and very graphically, right?
Yeah, like I know Japan's got a long history of like body horror and how their body horror makes our body horror look, you know, pretty tame. And it also reminds me that last night I went to an advanced screening of a film that is not a horror at all, but Saltburn. It's gonna be coming out in like a month. There are some pretty wild scenes in it, like some really things that made me like my jaw drop. You know, a little gross, a little what the heck. And so the other people in my class, because it was a thing for one of my classes that we went to, they're saying like, well, nonetheless, I think they were like arguing over whether it was good or not, and they were arguing about how gross it was at times. And somebody was like, this is like, we can all agree that no other film has come close to this level of depravity. Oh, you sweet summer child. Somebody did not watch WatchMojo.com's top 10 controversial movies in middle school.
Somebody hasn't seen a Serbian film.
Oh my God. Thank God I got to like read the plot of that on Wikipedia, so I didn't have to actually watch that.
Got to X out of that one.
What I can remember, Audition is the one with the Achilles scene, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the general premise of Audition is that a lonely widower sets up a scheme with his son to find a new girlfriend, and it seems pretty innocent at first. They're going to audition women for a fake ballet, and so he seems to find the perfect match for him, and wants to date this woman who turns out to be a severe sexual sadist, and it just escalates extremely quickly from that point on. And I mean, it is free from that like cultural censorship, because the philosophy is different in Japan. The philosophy is like, the philosophy here is, if you see it, it's going to influence you to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And in Japan, their philosophy is, well, if you see it and get to experience it vicariously through harmless media, you won't do it. You kind of get your yayas out, right?
That's what I keep trying to. That's what I was trying to tell people when they were worried about the school shootings and like, oh, they're playing Call of Duty. That's why they're doing the shootings. It's like, no, most of the time kids are playing Call of Duty, and that's why they're not shooting up their schools.
I also think, Japan, I learned this a couple days ago, has like a 99% conviction rate. So I also think that helps, like, you know, to deter like crime, stuff like that.
But you know, so this is the thing. So my honeymoon was in Japan. And I got to tell you, being in a city the size of Tokyo, right? And I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, so I went to New York all the time. And I can tell you that even in the 90s and 2000s, New York was not without its crime. It was definitely getting cleaned up at that point by Rudy Giuliani and the likes, but it still wasn't the nicest place to be. But you go to Tokyo, and I went in 2018, and you get a sense when you're there that you could leave 100,000 yen note, which is like $1,000 bill here, right on the floor of the subway, go do your thing all day, and you could come back at the end of the day, and that dollar will be right there at the end of the day. And that's just like it's not like there's even a threatening menace of crime. There's not even an aura of crime there. So a 99% conviction rate, yeah, but I don't know where like this crime is coming from. It's kind of eerie when you're in it. You're like, this is a little different. But their media is so much more violent and depraved, and like there's a lot of like I said, cultural taboos that are explored in manga and in anime and in their J-horror.
We're gonna take a break, one more break, and then when we get back, I want to hear some of your favorite horror movies, shows, books, stuff like that, and then we'll wrap it up. So, yeah, we'll be back.
Titan Radio would like to thank The Frida, a nonprofit art house movie theater located in Santa Ana. For more information, visit thefridacinema.org.
You talking to me?
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. Just a flesh wound.
Wax on, hot. Wax off.
I know Kung Fu. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Here.
Okay, so I want to ask you guys, what are your favorite pieces of horror media, whether it be books, movies, shows?
You go first. I need to pull up mine.
For me, I was saying this, I'm very basic with my taste in horror. I think a lot of horror is universally lauded because it's good. So for me, like I said, John Carpenter is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. So Halloween, The Thing, those are standards for me. The Shining, The Exorcist. But, getting into horror TV, I really love the Monster of the Week episodes of The X-Files, where they just kind of got really creative with the creature feature kind of genre and building off of that.
Yeah. I would say some of my favorite horrors. If you count like thrillers too, then
Sure.
I could say like Silence of the Lambs, Seven might be it for me. More recently, Ari Aster's work, Hereditary, Midsummer.
That's great.
Really like Get Out. I really like what are some other ones? Obviously the first Scream,
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah.
Okay. I just recently watched it, so I just have like an affinity for it. So The Ring, the 2002 movie.
It's good.
I thought like that was probably my favorite Gore Verbinski film. Like that, and then the first Pirates movie. It's like up there. I thought it was like a really good performance by Naomi Watts. Just really good attention to detail. Very good remake. And then the Final Destination series. I really like that. The first movie's great. I just love like the whole thing about like, you're leaving high school, you're a teenager, like this is supposed to be like first chapter, rest of your life, and then like you're thinking, you're not going to die at this moment, and then just like it's an interesting watch. So I'd recommend anyone listening to this watch all of them except the Final Destination, which is the fourth one. I love Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps.
Yeah.
They're great. 90s horror TV shows that aired in reruns when I was younger, and I think are still on streaming somewhere. Also, the Goosebumps books.
Yeah.
Very unsettling. I remember there was one in particular called Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, which actually ironically got me to stop playing piano. Which is why I know 2 songs on piano, and it's Heart and Soul and then Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the most basic of songs. And then also the Twilight Zone. Not all of it's horror, but just, some of it's very unsettling.
I love
it. And, I really like, especially like the original show, the black and whiteness of it all just gives that that eerie vibe. And Rod Serling always talking from just as that narrator always just made me feel off in some way.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up Goosebumps, and I love that because you're triggering these memories for me. There was a series called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes.
And I remember that was the first piece of horror as a very little kid that I felt this is so scary, I have to hide it from my parents, right? And that was stuff you read under the covers. And I just like the illustrations, the ink blot illustrations and everything. I mean, that really formed my taste for horror at a really early age. So I appreciate you bringing up Goosebumps because it instantly sparked that memory for me.
Yeah.
I honestly, at one point, was thinking of doing just a horror podcast where, like, each episode I would just, like, bring in, like, a different, like, scary story or urban legend.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I think I still might do that for another episode, but maybe the next episode, since it'll still be October. So we'll see. Yeah, I thought we had some very productive conversation today.
Yeah.
80s horror, 80s slashers, all that other stuff. I'd also like to thank you guys for doing this on such short notice.
Yeah.
Literally, just like I just met you and we were talking outside the recording booth, and now I've recorded a almost hour-long podcast together. So, yeah.
It's great. My pleasure.
Yep.
Yeah, my pleasure, too.
If you guys want to plug your shows again one more time for anyone listening.
The Dean's List, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Don't miss it.
And Midnight Madness with Monty Stacks, 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on TitanRadio.org.
All right. And also Rent-Free History, 8 a.m. On TitanRadio.org also. And other places in the future, but for right now, TitanRadio.org. So I'd like to thank you guys again for being on here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you to everyone that was listening. I hope you guys have a great time listening to this and just a great day overall. All right. And goodbye.